I am Walter Thompson, 74 years old and somehow still reeling from wounds my own children inflicted. As a retired postal supervisor who worked 43 years for the government, I thought I'd earned respect and dignity in my golden years. But 2 weeks after we buried Eleanor, they invited themselves over for what they called a family meeting. Between my untouched coffee and their rehearsed speeches, my son Richard leaned forward, his wife Amanda nodding beside him. You know, Dad, you are lucky we even care enough to help. Pride goes a long way, but practicality pays the bills. I simply set my mug down and listened. That night, I opened Eleanor's secret folder and called the lawyer about activating the main plan. Growing up in Boston meant survival to my generation. But inside our modest three-bedroom house with its small front porch and Eleanor's carefully tended garden was a fortress of love and planning I thought my children understood. My kitchen painted pale yellow at Eleanor's insistence, despite my preference for white, became the battleground where they tried to auction off my independence. The phone had rung at 6 that morning, Richard's voice carrying that restrained impatience I'd known since he was a teenager asking for gas money. Only now, at 42, he wasn't asking. We found a buyer, Dad. This place is too much for you alone. They had already calculated my life in spreadsheets, measured my worth in square footage, decided that a man my age couldn't possibly manage his own affairs. They assumed I carried debt like so many of our neighbors assumed Eleanor's medical bills had broken us. What they didn't know was that Eleanor Thompson had been 10 steps ahead of them for years, and she'd taught her husband how to play chess while they were still learning checkers. Richard, I said, keeping my tone even, you've been planning this for a while. That's called being responsible, he countered. We can't sit around until something happens to you. I let the sentence hang there ugly and unpolished. Until something happens to you. Thanks for your concern, I said, my voice as flat as the morning light across the kitchen counter. I'll think about it. Dad, but I ended the call before he could sell me my own life in bullet points. An hour later, Amanda's silver BMW pulled into my driveway with the precision of a surgical instrument. She stepped out carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, her blonde hair pulled back in what Eleanor used to call a boardroom bun. Everything about Amanda screamed efficiency, from her pressed slacks to her practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. Walter, she said, letting herself in without waiting for an invitation. I hope Richard didn't upset you earlier. You know how he gets when he's worried. She spread papers across my kitchen table like a general planning a siege. Legal documents, financial projections, architectural drawings. The basement apartment plan was rendered in cheerful pastels that couldn't disguise what it really was, a cell with a kitchenette. We've designed your space, she said, pointing to the drawings with a manicured finger. Full bathroom, separate entrance, even a little sitting area. You'd have complete privacy while still being close to family. Privacy. The word tasted like copper pennies in my mouth. It's really quite generous, she continued, her voice taking on that particular tone people use when they're about to tell you what's good for you. Most people your age, especially in your circumstances, would be grateful for this kind of arrangement. Your circumstances, not our circumstances. Mine. As if being a 74-year-old man automatically made me a charity case. The market analysis shows your house is worth more than you'd expect, she said, sliding another document toward me. We could clear the contractor costs for the basement renovation and still have plenty left over for Lily's education. It's really a win-win for everyone. Win-win. There it was again, that phrase that meant everybody wins except the person being won against. And Richard mentioned the mortgage situation, she added delicately. We understand you might be behind on payments. There's no shame in that. Medical bills can devastate even the most careful planners. Before I could correct her assumption, my daughter Patricia's Camry pulled up behind Amanda's BMW. Patricia stepped out looking like she'd rather be anywhere else, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a double shift. At 40, she carried herself with the tired dignity of a single mother who'd learned to fight every battle twice. Hey, Dad, she said, kissing my cheek. Her embrace felt apologetic, like she was already sorry for what was coming. Patricia, Amanda said brightly, perfect timing. I was just showing your father the basement plans. Patricia glanced at the papers, then at me. Dad, you know, I think this might be, it could be good for you, having family close. But her voice carried no conviction, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. This was my daughter who'd worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school, who'd never asked me for a dime she couldn't pay back. Now she stood in my kitchen enlisted in someone else's campaign. We've all discussed it, Amanda continued smoothly. As a family, we think it's the most practical solution for everyone involved. The word hit me like a physical blow. Family. As if the three of them had held a board meeting about my life and voted me off the island of my own independence. I looked at Patricia, really looked at her. The dark circles under her eyes, the way she held her shoulders like she was carrying invisible weight. When did this meeting happen? I asked quietly. She couldn't meet my gaze. Last week, at Richard's house. We're worried about you, Dad, living here alone. Last week, while I was still finding Eleanor's reading glasses on random tables and hearing her voice in empty rooms, they'd been planning my future around someone else's dining room table. We know what's best for people your age, Amanda said, her smile growing more fixed. The statistics on elderly men living alone are quite sobering. People your age, not you specifically, Walter Thompson, who'd run a postal facility with 200 employees and never missed a day of work in 43 years. Just people your age, a demographic to be managed and relocated. The realization hit me with crystal clarity. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about liquidating an asset that happened to have my name on it. And Eleanor, God rest her soul, had seen it coming long before I had. I need some time to think, I said, standing up. This is a lot to process. Richard arrived then, briefcase in hand, looking like he'd just stepped out of a business meeting. Dad, the buyers are very interested. They're willing to close quickly. How quickly? I asked, my suspicion growing. They could sign next week. We'd handle everything. Next week. 43 years in this house and they expected me to leave in a week. Is there a reason for the rush? I asked, watching Richard's face carefully. A flicker of something worry, maybe, or guilt crossed his features before his confident mask slipped back into place. The market's hot right now. We don't want to miss this opportunity. I nodded slowly, understanding more than they realized. I see. Well, like I said, I need some time. Dad, Richard began, but Patricia interrupted. Let's give him some space, Richard. This is a big decision. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but checked his watch instead. Fine, but the buyers won't wait forever. I'll tell them you're considering it. After they left, the house felt quieter than it had since the funeral. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by their plans for my life, and felt a strange calm settle over me. Eleanor and I had spent decades working side by side, saving penny by penny, building a life together. She'd been the planner, the one who looked 5 steps ahead, while I handled what was right in front of us. In our bedroom, I pulled out the small lockbox we kept in the closet. Inside was a folder labeled Contingency in Eleanor's neat handwriting. I'd never opened it before. It had been our agreement that this was her domain, her backup plan if things went sideways. And things had definitely gone sideways. Inside the folder were property deeds, bank statements, and a letter addressed to me in Eleanor's handwriting. The letter was dated just 3 months before her diagnosis. My dearest Walter, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone and things aren't going well with the kids. I've watched Richard and Amanda's spending habits for years. The country club membership, the luxury cars, the private schools. None of it matches what he makes at the investment firm. They're living beyond their means, and I've feared for years they might eventually look to our home as a solution to their financial problems. You remember our trips to Maine? Those weren't just vacations. 10 years ago, I started putting aside money from my inheritance. Little by little, I purchased a small house on the coast in Booth Bay Harbor. It's all paid for, Walter. No mortgage, no debt. Just a quiet place where you can live in peace if our children forget what we taught them about respect and dignity. I've arranged everything with Martin Green, our attorney. Call him when you need to. And know that whatever happens, I trust your judgment. You've always been the heart of our family. All my love, Eleanor. I read the letter 3 times, feeling Eleanor's presence so strongly it was as if she were standing beside me. Then I picked up the phone and called Martin Green. I've been expecting your call, Martin said when I explained the situation. Eleanor was very specific about the circumstances under which you'd be contacting me. She knew this would happen. Let's just say she considered it a possibility. She was a remarkable woman, Walter. Very forward-thinking. That she was? I agreed, my heart aching with love and gratitude for my wife of 45 years. I can activate what Eleanor called the main plan whenever you're ready. Martin continued. The house is fully furnished and maintained. There's a caretaker who checks on it regularly. How soon can I go? You could leave tomorrow if you needed to, but Eleanor suggested a more strategic approach. Would you like to hear it? Please. As Martin outlined Eleanor's plan, I couldn't help but smile. Even from beyond the grave, my wife was still taking care of me, still 10 steps ahead of everyone else. The next morning, Richard showed up with a real estate agent, a slick-looking woman with a too bright smile, who immediately began assessing my home as if I weren't there. The kitchen will need updating, of course, but the bones are good, and this location, you can't beat it. Dad, Richard said, pulling me aside while the agent measured the living room. I know this seems sudden, but Amanda and I have actually been planning this for a while. How long is a while? I asked. He shifted uncomfortably. We've been talking with contractors about the basement renovation for about 6 months. 6 months. Eleanor had still been alive 6 months ago, fighting her battle with cancer with the same quiet dignity she'd shown her entire life. I see, I said. And the financial arrangement, how exactly does that work? Richard straightened his tie at Tell. I'd recognized since he was a teenager trying to hide something. It's simple. We sell the house, use part of the proceeds to renovate our basement for you, and the rest goes into a trust for your care. Managed by whom? Well, by me, of course. I'm in finance, Dad. It makes sense. I nodded slowly. And what about the mortgage you mentioned? The one you told Amanda I was behind on? Richard's face flushed. That was a misunderstanding. I just meant that with property taxes and maintenance, this place is probably eating up your pension. My pension that you seem to know so much about, I said, watching him carefully. Tell me, Richard, how exactly do you know the details of my financial situation? He wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm just concerned, that's all. Making sure you're taken care of. That's thoughtful. And this buyer who's so eager, they're offering market value. A little under actually, but it's a cash offer, no contingencies, very clean deal. I see. I let the silence stretch between us, watching him fidget. And your sudden interest in selling my house, quickly does it have anything to do with your own financial situation? His head snapped up. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm wondering why my son, who hasn't visited me more than twice a year for the past decade, is suddenly so concerned about my living arrangements that he's willing to upend my entire life in the span of a week. The real estate agent chose that moment to return to the living room. This place has such potential. I've got some comps I'd like to show you. Thank you, but that won't be necessary, I said firmly. I'm not selling my home. Richard's face hardened. Dad, be reasonable. You can't manage this place by yourself. I've managed just fine for the past 40 years, and I'll continue to do so. The buyers won't wait, he warned. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For whom? I asked quietly. Before Richard could answer, the front door opened, and Patricia walked in, followed by her daughter Lily. At 18, Lily was the spitting image of her mother at that age, same determined chin, same thoughtful eyes. Grandpa, Lily rushed over to hug me. Mom said you might be moving. Is that true? I looked from Lily to Patricia, whose expression was unreadable. I'm considering my options, I said carefully. Options? Richard scoffed. Dad, this is the best option. It's the only sensible choice. I don't know, Lily said, looking around the living room. This is Grandpa's home. It feels wrong to just sell it out from under him. Richard's jaw tightened. This is an adult discussion, Lily. It's about what's practical. Is it practical to ignore what Grandpa wants? She challenged. Or is it just convenient for you? Lily, Patricia warned, but there was a flicker of something pride maybe in her eyes. Richard turned to the real estate agent. Could you give us a few minutes, family matter? After the agent stepped outside, Richard rounded on me. Dad, I'm trying to help you. Why are you fighting this? Because this isn't about helping me, I said calmly. This is about helping yourself. His face flushed with anger. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. You need money and you see my house as a solution to your problem. The room fell silent. Patricia's eyes widened, and Lily looked back and forth between us, confused. Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's ridiculous. I'm doing fine. Are you the country club membership, the private schools, Amanda's BMW? It all adds up, doesn't it? And investment banking isn't what it used to be, is it, son? You don't know what you're talking about, Richard snapped, but I could see the panic in his eyes. I know more than you think, I said. I know, for instance, that you've been using my social security number to open credit accounts. I know you've been intercepting my mail, specifically my bank statements. And I strongly suspect you've been siphoning money from my accounts for some time now. Patricia gasped. Richard, tell me that's not true. Richard's face had gone pale. Dad's confused. The stress of Mom's death. I'm not confused, I interrupted. Martin Green has been tracking the unauthorized access to my accounts for months now. We have records, Richard, and signatures. Who's Martin Green? Patricia asked. My attorney, I replied, not taking my eyes off Richard. Eleanor's attorney, too. He's been documenting everything. Richard's confident facade crumbled. It's not what you think. I was going to pay it back. I just needed to bridge some gaps in cash flow. How much? Patricia demanded. How much did you take from Dad? Richard wouldn't answer, so I did. $87,000 over the past 14 months. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. My God, Richard. It's not stealing when it's family, he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. Dad would have given it to me if I'd asked. I just didn't want to worry him with my temporary financial setbacks. So, instead you decided to sell his house out from under him and stash him in your basement? Lily asked incredulously. It's not like that, Richard protested. The basement apartment would be nice. It would be a prison, I said quietly. And I won't be a prisoner in my own family. Richard's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Dad. I'm trying to look out for your future. No, son. You're looking out for yourself. You always have. Richard grabbed his coat. This discussion isn't over. You're not thinking clearly. We'll talk when you've calmed down. After he stormed out, Patricia sank into a chair. Dad, I had no idea, I swear. I believe you, I said, patting her hand. You have always been honest with me. I knew he was pushing this plan hard, but I thought he was just being his usual controlling self. I never imagined. She trailed off, shaking her head. What are you going to do, press charges? No, I said. That's not what Eleanor would have wanted. But I am going to protect myself and you and Lily from further damage. How? Lily asked. I smiled, thinking of Eleanor's meticulous planning. I think it's time for a change of scenery. That evening, after Patricia and Lily had gone, I sat in Eleanor's reading chair, the contingency folder open on my lap. In addition to the property deed for the main house, there were bank statements showing a healthy savings account, insurance documents, and detailed instructions for what Eleanor called Operation New Chapter. As I read through her plans, I couldn't help but marvel at my wife's foresight. While I'd been focused on our day-to-day life, she'd been quietly building an escape hatch, a safe place to land, if our children forgot the values we tried to instill in them. The next day I called Patricia. Can you come over? There's something I need to discuss with you. When she arrived, I could see she'd been crying. I confronted Richard last night, she explained. It didn't go well. He tried to convince me you were confused, that you'd mixed up some regular financial help he'd been giving you with theft. I shook my head. And what did you say? I told him I'd seen the documents from Mr. Green, that there was no confusion. She sighed heavily. He accused me of taking your side against family. Can you believe that? As if stealing from your father is a family value? Richard's in trouble, I said. Financial trouble, yes, but more than that. He's lost his way. What are you going to do, Dad? I gestured to the folder on the coffee table. Eleanor left me a gift. A way forward. Patricia listened in stunned silence as I explained about the house in Maine, the savings account, the entire backup plan Eleanor had created. She knew, Patricia asked when I finished. She knew Richard would do something like this. She suspected he might. Your mother was an observant woman. She noticed the changes in Richard's lifestyle, the way he dodged questions about money, how he'd never let us visit his house. She worried, but she never wanted to believe the worst of him. So she prepared for it anyway, Patricia said, a note of admiration in her voice. That was Eleanor. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I took Patricia's hand. I'm going to Maine, Patricia, soon. But before I go, I need to know something. The meeting at Richard's house last week, what really happened? Patricia looked away. Richard said you were struggling, that you couldn't afford to keep up the house anymore, that you were too proud to ask for help. She paused. He showed us papers, bank statements, bills saying you were nearly bankrupt. He made it sound like the basement apartment was a lifeline, not a cell. And you believed him. Not entirely, but Richard has always been convincing. And Amanda had all these statistics about elderly people living alone falls depression. She trailed off. I should have questioned it more. I'm sorry, Dad. You have nothing to apologize for, I assured her. So when are you leaving for Maine? Soon, but there's something else I wanted to talk to you about. I hesitated. Lily's college fund, the one you've been saving for since she was born. Patricia's face fell. It's gone, Dad. Richard convinced me to let him invest it. Said he could double it in 2 years with a sure thing at his firm. That was 3 years ago. When I asked about it last month, he said the market had turned, that these things happen. 18 years of saving, gone. Anger rose in me hot and sharp. How much? Almost $60,000. I took a deep breath. Eleanor thought of that too. What do you mean? I showed her another document from the folder. She set up a trust for Lily, for her education. It's been growing for 10 years. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. How much is in it? Enough for 4 years at any state university, plus living expenses. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. When she looked up, her eyes were red but determined. Mom was always the smart one. She was, I agreed, and now I need to be smart too. Richard won't stop Patricia. He needs money too badly. As long as I'm here, he'll keep trying to get control of this house of my accounts. What can I do to help? I smiled. How do you feel about Maine? The plan came together over the next week. Martin Green expedited the paperwork to secure my assets and filed a restraining order against Richard, preventing him from accessing any of my financial information. I began quietly packing, taking only what was truly important. Photos, keepsakes, Eleanor's favorite books. Richard called repeatedly, alternating between anger and artificial concern. Dad, you're making a huge mistake. Let me come over so we can talk about this like adults. There's nothing to talk about, Richard. You stole from me. You lied to your sister. You tried to sell my home without my consent. That's not fair. I was trying to help. No, son, you were helping yourself, and now I'm going to help myself. The day before our planned departure, Richard showed up unannounced. When I opened the door, he pushed past me into the house. We need to talk, Dad, now. There's nothing to say, I replied calmly. I've made my decision. Richard paced the living room, agitated. You don't understand. I'm in trouble, Dad. Serious trouble. Financial trouble. Yes. He ran a hand through his hair. I made some investments that didn't pan out. Used money that wasn't exactly mine to invest. Client money, I guessed. He nodded miserably. If I don't replace it by the end of the month, I'm looking at fraud charges. Prison time, Dad. And you thought selling my house would solve that problem. It would have bought me time to fix things, he insisted. I just need a chance to turn this around. I studied my son, this stranger who wore Richard's face but had none of his childhood honesty or integrity. How much do you need? Hope flickered across his features. About $250,000. I laughed. I couldn't help it. And you thought you'd get that from selling this house? The market value is over $400,000, he said defensively. But you told me the buyers were offering a little under market value. How much under, Richard? And who are these mysterious buyers who can close so quickly, no questions asked? He looked away. A development company. They want to tear it down, build condos. And what were they really offering? He mumbled something I couldn't hear. Speak up, Richard. $220,000, he admitted, for a $400,000 property, and how much of that would have actually gone into my care trust? He didn't answer. How much, Richard? $50,000, he finally said. The rest would have gone toward my situation. I shook my head, disgusted. So you were planning to sell my home for almost half its value, steal most of the proceeds, and lock me in your basement with a pittance to live on. Does that about sum it up? You make it sound so calculated, he protested. Wasn't it? I asked. Tell me, does Amanda know the full extent of your situation? Something like fear flashed across his face. No, and she can't find out, Dad. She'd leave me. Perhaps she should, I suggested, before you drag her down with you. Richard's expression hardened. So that's it. You're just going to turn your back on me when I need help the most. I'm not turning my back on you, Richard. I'm refusing to be your victim. What am I supposed to do? He demanded. The right thing, I said simply. Confess to your firm. Take the consequences of your actions. Rebuild with honesty. He laughed bitterly. Easy for you to say. You're not the one facing prison. No, I'm the one facing homelessness at the hands of my own son. Richard fell silent, the truth of my words hanging between us. I want to help you, Richard, I said finally, but not like this, not by sacrificing my dignity and independence. Then how, he asked, and for a moment I caught a glimpse of the little boy who used to look to me for guidance. By offering you a choice, I said, a chance to do the right thing, even if it's the harder path. The next morning, Patricia and Lily arrived early, their car packed with their own essentials. The plan was simple: drive to Maine, start fresh. The three of us supporting each other. As we were loading the last of my boxes, a taxi pulled up and Richard stepped out. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept. Dad, he said, approaching cautiously, can we talk? Just for a minute. Patricia moved protectively to my side. Haven't you done enough damage? It's all right, I told her. Give us a moment. When we were alone, Richard handed me an envelope. It's my confession, to my firm, to the authorities. Everything I did, everyone I took money from, including you and Patricia. I took the envelope, surprised. You're turning yourself in, he nodded, his eyes red-rimmed. You were right. It's the only way forward. I've been running so long, living this lie. I'm tired, Dad. What about Amanda? She knows everything now. She's furious, hurt. I don't know if she'll stand by me through what's coming. And what is coming, Richard? He shrugged, resigned. Probably prison. Definitely the end of my career. Bankruptcy, most likely. Despite everything he'd done, my heart ached for my son. It won't be easy. No, he agreed, but it's necessary. What you said yesterday about doing the right thing, it kept me up all night. I realized I'd been taking shortcuts for so long, I'd forgotten how to walk the straight path. I studied him, looking for signs of manipulation or deception, but saw only exhaustion and regret. What do you want from me, Richard? Nothing, he said, and seemed surprised by his own answer. For once, I'm not here to take something from you. I wanted you to know that I'm trying to do better, to be better. I nodded slowly. That's a start. He glanced at the packed cars. So you're really leaving? Yes, this house holds too many ghosts now. Will you ever come back? I considered the question. I don't know. That depends on a lot of things. On me, he said. It wasn't a question. Partly, I acknowledged, but also on me, on what I need going forward. Richard looked at the ground. I'm sorry, Dad, for everything. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. Apologies are like seeds, Richard. They're just the beginning. What matters is what grows from them. As Richard's taxi drove away, Patricia came to stand beside me. Everything okay? No, I said honestly, but maybe someday it will be. We locked up the house, not selling it, just leaving it for now. Martin would keep an eye on things, make sure it was maintained. The future of the house, like so many other things, remained undecided. As we pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at the home where Eleanor and I had raised our family, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where we'd grown old together. I felt her presence beside me, approving of this journey. Ready, Dad? Patricia asked from the driver's seat. Lily squeezed my hand from the back seat. Ready for our adventure, Grandpa. I smiled, thinking of the little house by the sea waiting for us, Eleanor's final gift. A fresh start, a new chapter. Yes, I said, I'm ready. True family wealth isn't measured in property or inheritance, but in dignity, respect, and the wisdom to know the difference between love and manipulation. Eleanor Thompson understood that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your loved ones is the strength to stand alone when necessary. She taught that elder wisdom comes not from accommodating disrespect, but from setting boundaries that protect both your legacy and the character of those who would inherit it. The Maine coastline unfurled before us like a painting coming to life. Rocky shores embracing the Atlantic spruce trees standing sentinel on rugged cliffs, and the distant call of gulls welcoming us to our new beginning. As Patricia navigated the winding coastal road toward Boothbay Harbor, I felt a strange mixture of grief and anticipation. Leaving behind the home Eleanor and I had built together felt like abandoning her memory, yet following her carefully laid plans brought her presence closer than ever. "There it is," I said as we rounded the final curve and the house came into view. Even from a distance, I could see why Eleanor had chosen this place. A white clapboard cape with blue shutters perched on a small rise overlooking a protected cove. A wraparound porch faced the water, and a stone path led down to a private dock where a small rowboat bobbed gently with the tide. "It's beautiful," Patricia whispered, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Lily leaned forward from the back seat. Grandma had excellent taste. As we pulled into the gravel driveway, a woman emerged from the house wiping her hands on a dish towel. Short silver hair framed a weathered face with laugh lines around bright blue eyes. She waved as we parked. "You must be Walter," she called, approaching with an outstretched hand. "I'm Margaret Dawson, Eleanor's friend. We've been corresponding by email for years, but it's wonderful to finally meet you in person." I shook her hand, surprised by the strength in her grip. "Eleanor mentioned you often. Thank you for looking after the place. She was quite specific about how everything should be maintained." Margaret smiled. "That woman never left anything to chance." "No," I agreed. "She certainly didn't." Margaret helped us unload the cars and showed us around the house. The interior was simple but comfortable, wide plank pine floors, exposed beams and windows everywhere to capture the ocean views. Eleanor had furnished it sparingly but with care. A well-worn leather sofa faced a stone fireplace. Bookshelves lined the walls, and the kitchen was equipped with quality basics. "Eleanor came up about twice a year," Margaret explained as she filled the kettle for tea. "Always said she was visiting an old college friend who lived nearby." Which wasn't a lie, I was her roommate at Wellesley. But mostly she came to work on this place, adding little touches, making it ready. "Ready for what?" Patricia asked, running her hand along the smooth countertop. Margaret gave her a steady look. "For when it would be needed." That night after Margaret left and Lily had gone to bed, Patricia and I sat on the porch listening to the waves. "I keep thinking about what Margaret said," Patricia murmured, "about Mom making this place ready for when it would be needed. She saw this coming, didn't she, Richard's betrayal?" "Your mother was perceptive," I said carefully. "She noticed patterns in people's behavior that others missed. She never said anything to me about being concerned about Richard." "Would you have believed her?" Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "Probably not. Richard was always her golden boy, the successful one, the one who made it while I was just scraping by as a single mom. Eleanor was proud of you, Patricia, more than you know." She shook her head. "I always felt like I disappointed her by not becoming a doctor like she wanted." "Is that what she wanted?" Patricia looked surprised. "Well, yes, all those science camps she sent me to, the college prep courses." "Your mother wanted you to have options," I corrected gently. "She never once said she expected you to become a doctor. She admired your strength in raising Lily on your own, building a career in nursing, standing on your own 2 feet." "She never told me that." "She told me, many times, Shamahaz." I reached over and took her hand. "And she made arrangements for you, too, not just for me." Patricia's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "I haven't had a chance to show you everything in the contingency folder yet. There's a separate trust for you, to help with a down payment on a house of your own, or to further your education if you wanted to become a nurse practitioner. Whatever you choose." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't understand. Why didn't she tell us any of this while she was alive?" "I think she was hoping Richard would change on his own, that he'd remember the values we raised him with. But she prepared for the possibility that he wouldn't." "Yes." Patricia wiped her eyes. "She was so much smarter than all of us." "She certainly was smarter than me," I agreed with a sad smile. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of Lily's footsteps on the porch. "Sorry," she said. "I couldn't sleep." "Too much on your mind?" I asked. She nodded, sitting cross-legged on the weathered boards. "I keep thinking about what Uncle Richard did, taking Mom's savings from my college fund, trying to steal your house. It's like he's a completely different person than the uncle I thought I knew." Patricia put her arm around Lily's shoulders. "People show you who they really are when they think no one's looking." "Or when they're desperate," I added. Lily looked out at the moonlight silvering the water. "Do you think he'll really go to prison?" If he follows through with his confession, probably, I said. Financial fraud carries serious penalties. But he's trying to do the right thing now, isn't he? Shouldn't that count for something? I studied my granddaughter's face so young, yet already grappling with the complexities of justice and mercy. It might reduce his sentence, but more importantly, it gives him a chance to rebuild his character. Is that even possible? Patricia asked. To change that fundamentally. I have to believe it is, I said. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? The next few days passed in a blur of settling in. Margaret introduced us around town, and to my surprise, people welcomed us warmly. No prying questions, just simple kindness. The local diner owner refused to let me pay for my coffee. Eleanor always brought me chocolate from Boston, she explained. Said it was the only decent kind. Any friend of hers is a friend of mine. I hadn't realized how deeply Eleanor had integrated herself into this community during her brief visits over the years. She'd donated books to the local library, volunteered at the Historical Society, even helped fund renovations to the harbor master's office. All quietly, all without fanfare. Your wife was building you a safety net, Margaret observed as we walked along the harbor one morning. Not just a house, but a community. She was always 10 steps ahead of everyone else, I said. 11 at least. Margaret laughed. As days turned into weeks, we established a routine. Patricia found work at the local medical center. They were desperate for experienced nurses and practically hired her on the spot. Lily enrolled in online courses for her first semester of college planning to transfer to a Maine university for the spring term. And I began to heal. Walking the shore each morning, reading books Eleanor had left on the shelves, rediscovering the simple pleasures of life without the weight of betrayal hanging over me. I spent hours in the small garden behind the house, coaxing vegetables from the rocky soil, just as Eleanor must have done during her visits. Then, exactly 1 month after our arrival, reality intruded. Dad, Patricia called from inside the house. Phone for you. It's Martin. I wiped my hands on my jeans and took the cordless phone. Martin, is everything all right? Not exactly, my attorney replied, his voice tense. I just got a call from Amanda. Richard's been arrested. My stomach tightened. For the financial fraud. Yes, apparently he did go through with his confession, but it triggered an investigation that uncovered even more than he'd admitted to. The firm is pressing charges, as are several clients. I see. I sank into a porch chair. What does Amanda want? Money for his bail and a good criminal attorney. She says they have already had to sell their house to cover some of the restitution, but it wasn't enough. I closed my eyes, feeling suddenly tired. How much? The bail is set at $500,000. She needs at least $50,000 for the bust, plus a retainer for the lawyer. And she called you instead of me because she knows you've blocked Richard's number, and because she thought I might be more persuasive. I considered this. What do you think I should do, Martin? Professionally speaking, you have no obligation to help the man who stole from you and tried to sell your home without permission. And personally speaking, Martin sighed, he's still your son, Walter. But I've seen too many families bankrupted trying to fix problems they didn't create. Thank you for the advice, Martin. I'll think about it. After we hung up, I sat watching the tide go out, remembering Richard as a little boy, determined to build the tallest block tower, devastated when it inevitably toppled. He'd always wanted more, always reached higher, never satisfied with what he had. Patricia found me still sitting there an hour later. Martin called you too, I asked, noting her troubled expression. She nodded. Amanda called me directly afterward, said if we don't help Richard, he could spend years in prison. What did you tell her? That I needed to talk to you first. She sat beside me. Dad, I'm torn. What Richard did was terrible, but he's family, I finished for her. Yes. We sat in silence, watching a fishing boat make its way back to the harbor. Your mother would know what to do, I said finally. Patricia gave a sad laugh. Mom prepared for Richard betraying us, but I don't think she anticipated him going to prison. No, even Eleanor couldn't have predicted everything. That evening, the three of us held a family council around the kitchen table, weighing our options. I don't think we should give them anything, Lily declared. Uncle Richard stole my college fund, and now he's facing the consequences of that, I acknowledged. The question is whether those consequences are proportionate to the crime. He committed fraud, Grandpa. That's serious. It is, I agreed. But there's a difference between justice and vengeance. Patricia had been quiet, staring into her mug of tea. Now she looked up. What if we help with the attorney but not the bail? I considered this. A good defense lawyer could make a significant difference in his sentence, especially since he confessed voluntarily. But why should we spend a dime on him? Lily demanded. Because holding on to anger hurts us more than it hurts him, I said gently. That sounds like something Grandma would say, Lily grumbled. It is, and she was right about most things. In the end, we decided to pay the retainer for a reputable criminal defense attorney, enough to ensure Richard had proper representation, but not enough to shield him from the full consequences of his actions. I called Martin the next morning with our decision. I think that's wise, he said. Limited help with clear boundaries. Please make it clear to Amanda that this is all we're prepared to do, I instructed. No bail money, no ongoing financial support. I'll convey that message, Martin promised. And Walter, there's something else you should know. The investigation into Richard's activities uncovered some troubling connections to your neighbor back in Boston, Charles Freeman. Does that name mean anything to you? I frowned. Charlie? He's lived next door to us for 20 years. Good man, retired school teacher. What about him? According to the financial records, Richard convinced him to invest his entire retirement savings in a fraudulent scheme, over $300,000. The news hit me like a physical blow. Charlie lost everything. I'm afraid so. He's one of the victims named in the case against Richard. After hanging up, I paced the porch, anger and shame warring inside me. Charlie Freeman had been a good neighbor and friend for decades. He'd helped Eleanor with heavy yard work when my back was acting up, cleared our driveway during snowstorms without being asked. And my son had stolen his retirement. I need to make this right, I told Patricia that evening. Not for Richard's sake, but for Charlie's. Dad, you can't replace $300,000, she protested. That would mean selling the Boston house and probably most of what Mom set aside for us here. Not all of it, I insisted, but some kind of restitution. Charlie doesn't deserve to spend his final years in poverty because of what Richard did. We were still discussing possibilities when a car pulled into the driveway, an expensive black SUV with rental plates. The driver's door opened and Amanda stepped out looking as polished as ever, despite the circumstances. What is she doing here? Patricia muttered. And how did she find us? Only a few people know where we are, I reminded her. Martin, Margaret. You think one of them told her? I shook my head. Not intentionally, perhaps, but information has a way of traveling. I went out to meet Amanda, who stood awkwardly by her car, clearly uncertain of her welcome. Amanda, I said neutrally, this is unexpected. Walter, she smoothed her already immaculate hair. I apologize for showing up unannounced. Your attorney wouldn't give me your address, but I managed to find it anyway. I see. And why are you here? She glanced at the house where Patricia and Lily watched from the window. Could we speak privately? Please. I led her down to the dock where two Adirondack chairs faced the water. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. It's beautiful here, she finally said. I can see why Eleanor chose it. Amanda, I doubt you drove all this way to admire the view. She sighed, her perfect composure cracking slightly. No, I came because your attorney delivered your message about the defense lawyer, but no bail money. That's correct. Walter without bail, Richard stays in jail until the trial. That could be months. I'm aware of how the system works. Her eyes flashed. Do you have any idea what it's like in there for someone like Richard? Someone like Richard, I repeated. You mean someone who's used to privilege and comfort, someone who's never faced consequences for his actions. That's not fair, isn't it? I studied her face, seeing fear beneath the indignation. Amanda, I'm genuinely curious. When did you discover the extent of Richard's financial dealings before or after his arrest? She looked away. I knew something was wrong. The past few years, bills would pile up, then suddenly be paid off. He was secretive about our accounts, defensive when I asked questions. But you never pressed the issue. I trusted my husband, she said, an edge to her voice, just like you trusted your son. The point struck home. She was right, I had missed signs too. What do you want from me, Amanda, beyond the bail money? Her shoulders slumped slightly. I don't know anymore. Our lives are in free fall. The house is gone. My friends have disappeared. Richard's former colleagues pretend they don't see me in the grocery store. She blinked rapidly. I came here thinking I could convince you to help us rebuild, but now I realize how absurd that sounds. For the first time, I saw Amanda clearly not as Richard's entitled wife, but as another victim of his deceptions. Different from Charlie Freeman, certainly, as she'd benefited from the stolen money, but a victim nonetheless. What will you do now? I asked, my tone softer. I've moved in with my sister temporarily. I've started looking for work, but my resume has a 15-year gap. Turns out country club membership committee chair doesn't count as relevant experience. She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We talked a while longer as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Amanda revealed more details about Richard's schemes, how he'd leveraged their social connections to find victims, how the facade of success had become increasingly expensive to maintain. I should have seen it, she said, watching a pair of gulls squabble over a fish. I didn't want to. As Amanda prepared to leave, she'd booked a hotel in town for the night. Before driving back the next day, I made a decision. I won't provide bail money, I told her. Richard needs to face the consequences of his actions. But I'll help you. She looked surprised. Why would you do that? Because Eleanor would want me to distinguish between Richard's actions and yours, and because rebuilding a life is hard enough without doing it entirely alone. I offered to cover 3 months of living expenses while she found her footing, plus a small fund for retraining or education if she needed it to re-enter the workforce. I don't understand, she said, visibly confused. After everything that's happened, why help me at all? Because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you, I said, echoing my earlier words to Lily. And because second chances matter. After Amanda left, promising to think over my offer, Patricia confronted me in the kitchen. You're helping Amanda. After all her condescension, her part in trying to lock you in their basement, I'm helping her find independence, I corrected. There's a difference. She stood by while Richard stole from us. And now she's facing the collapse of her entire life. Isn't that punishment enough? Patricia threw up her hands. First you hire a lawyer for Richard, now financial support for Amanda. What happened to boundaries and consequences? Boundaries aren't walls, Patricia. They're gates that teach people how to enter properly. Her eyes widened. That sounds like something Mom would say. It is, I admitted. One of her favorites. The next morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Charles Freeman. Walter, he said, his voice tired. Your lawyer contacted me, told me where to find you. Charlie, I'm so sorry about what Richard did. Not your fault, he replied gruffly. You didn't raise him to become a crook. Oh, nevertheless, I want to make it right. That's what your lawyer said. But Walter, I can't accept your money. You didn't steal from me. It's not about obligation, Charlie. It's about friendship. We talked for nearly an hour. Charlie told me how Richard had approached him after Eleanor's funeral, offering exclusive investment opportunities as a courtesy to his father's longtime friend. How the promised returns had seemed too good to be true, but Richard had shown him falsified statements from other investors who'd supposedly doubled their money. I should have known better, Charlie said. Been teaching kids about critical thinking for 40 years, and I couldn't spot an obvious scam. Con artists succeed because they know which buttons to push, I told him. Richard knew you trusted our family. By the end of the conversation, we'd reached a compromise. I wouldn't replace the entire amount Richard had stolen, but I would provide enough to ensure Charlie could keep his house and live with basic dignity. I still don't like taking your money, Charlie insisted. Think of it as a loan then, I suggested. When Richard eventually makes restitution, you can pay me back. You really believe he'll make restitution? I have to believe it's possible, I said. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? As autumn settled over the Maine coast, bringing crimson and gold to the trees and a sharp edge to the ocean breeze, we received updates about Richard's case. His attorney, the one we'd hired, had negotiated a plea deal. In exchange for testimony against others involved in the larger fraud scheme, Richard's potential sentence would be reduced. He's looking at 3 to 5 years instead of 10 to 15, Martin explained over the phone. And he's agreed to a restitution plan for all the victims, though it will take years to repay everyone. Will he actually follow through? I wondered aloud. The court will garnish any wages he earns after release, Martin assured me. He won't have a choice. Patricia had found her footing in Boothbay Harbor. The medical center valued her experience and had already offered her a supervisory position starting in the new year. Lily had made friends at her online university and was thriving in her classes, planning to transfer to the University of Maine for the spring semester. And I was finding my way forward without Eleanor, guided by her foresight, but making my own choices now. I joined the Historical Society, where she'd volunteered, discovering a passion for preserving local maritime history. I'd made friends, established routines, begun to feel that this place was home. Then on the first truly cold day of November, as the harbor water turned slate gray under a threatening sky, another unexpected visitor arrived. I was in the garden covering the raised beds with straw for the winter when a taxi pulled up. The back door opened and Richard stepped out. My son looked nothing like the confident financial advisor who tried to sell my house. His designer clothes had been replaced by jeans and a worn sweater. His carefully styled hair was longer now, with threads of gray I hadn't noticed before. But the most striking change was in his eyes. The arrogance had been replaced by something more complex and uncertain. "Dad," he said, staying by the taxi, "I wasn't sure you'd be willing to see me." I straightened up, slowly, brush in hand. "They let you out on bail." He nodded. "The plea deal was finalized yesterday. I'm free until sentencing in January. And you came here." "I wanted to see you, to apologize in person." He glanced at the taxi driver. "But I can go if you'd rather not talk." I considered my options. Eleanor would know the right thing to do, the perfect balance between compassion and boundaries. But Eleanor wasn't here. "The driver can wait in town," I decided. "There's a diner on the harbor that serves decent coffee. We can talk for a bit." Relief washed over Richard's face. After giving instructions to the driver, he followed me into the house, looking around with undisguised curiosity. "Mom bought this place?" he asked as we entered the living room with his view of the cove. 10 years ago," I confirmed. "She visited regularly, said she was seeing an old college friend." "Margaret Dawson," Richard said, surprising me. "I remember Mom mentioning her." "You have a good memory." Richard's gaze fell on a photo of Eleanor on the mantel, one taken right here in Maine, her face radiant as she stood on the rocks above the tide pools. "I've had a lot of time to think lately, to remember things I should have paid attention to years ago." I gestured for him to sit, then took the chair opposite. "Why are you here, Richard, Illy?" He met my eyes directly, something the old Richard rarely did when conversations turned serious. "To take responsibility, not just legally, but personally, face to face. You could have done that over the phone." "No," he shook his head. "Some things need to be said in person." For the next hour, Richard laid bare the full extent of his financial and moral collapse. How it had started with small ethical compromises that grew larger, how the pressure to maintain appearances had driven him to increasingly desperate measures. He spoke without excuses or deflection, owning each choice that had led him to this point. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said finally. "I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I've done. To you, to Patricia, to Lily, to all the people who trusted me." I studied my son, looking for signs of the manipulation that had been his trademark. I found none, only exhaustion and regret. "What will you do after you serve your time?" I asked. "Start over, somehow." He rubbed his face. "I'll never work in finance again. That's part of the plea deal. But I've been talking with a prison outreach program that helps inmates avoid financial scams. Apparently, ex-cons make effective educators about fraud." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "And Amanda," I asked, "how is she?" A shadow crossed his face. "We're divorcing. Her choice, though, I can't blame her. She's actually doing okay, found an entry-level job at a real estate office." He hesitated. "She told me about your offer to help her. I don't understand it, but thank you. It's what your mother would have wanted." Richard nodded, his eyes glistening. Mom always could see the bigger picture. Before Richard left, I walked him down to the shore. The tide was coming in waves, crashing against the rocky coastline with increasing force as the storm approached. "I won't be at your sentencing," I told him, "but that doesn't mean I've abandoned you." "I understand," he said. "You've made a new life here. I wouldn't want to disrupt that." We stood side by side, watching the restless ocean. "What would Mom think of all this?" he asked suddenly. of what I've done, of where we all are now. I considered the question carefully. She'd be heartbroken about your choices, but proud of your decision to take responsibility for them. Do you really believe that? I do. I turned to face him. Eleanor believed in second chances, Richard, in the possibility of redemption. So do I. He nodded, blinking back tears. I'll try to be worthy of that belief. As his taxi disappeared down the coastal road, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for what our family had lost, hope for what might still be salvaged. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, driving me back inside where Patricia waited, her expression a mix of concern and anger. Was that Richard's taxi I saw? She demanded. Yes. Here in our sanctuary, her voice rose. Why would you even speak to him after everything he's done? Because he's still our family, I said gently. Flawed, broken, but ours. He stopped being family when he stole from us. Is that what Eleanor would say? Patricia flinched. Don't use Mom against me. I'm not. I'm asking a genuine question. She turned away, arms crossed tightly. What did he want? To apologize. To take responsibility. And you believed him. I moved to stand beside her at the window where the rain now lashed against the glass. I believe he's beginning to understand the magnitude of what he's done. True remorse takes time. It's a process, not a moment. What happens now? Patricia asked, her anger giving way to uncertainty. He goes to prison in January, serves his time, tries to rebuild afterward. And us? Do we just welcome him back with open arms? No, I said firmly. Trust once broken must be re-earned through actions, not words. But we can leave the door open to that possibility. I don't know if I can, Patricia admitted. You don't have to decide today, I told her. Or tomorrow, or even next year. Healing happens on its own timeline. That night, I sat alone on the porch despite the cold, bundled in Eleanor's old cardigan, watching the storm spend its fury against the shore. I thought about the paths that had brought us all here, some chosen, others forced upon us. I thought about Eleanor's foresight in creating this sanctuary not just for me, but for Patricia and Lily too. Most of all, I thought about second chances. For Richard, certainly, but also for Patricia, who was rediscovering her strength and worth. For Lily, whose educational future had been secured against all odds. For Amanda, finding her way toward independence. Even for me, learning to navigate the world without Eleanor while carrying her wisdom forward. The storm eventually passed as storms do. The moon emerged from behind tattered clouds, casting silver light across the now calm water. In its glow, I could almost see Eleanor sitting beside me, nodding her approval at how I'd handled Richard's visit. I'm trying to do what you would do, Sem, I whispered to her memory, to find that balance between justice and mercy. The wind lifted slightly, carrying the scent of salt and pine. Not an answer precisely, but a reminder that life continues, changes, evolves, that endings make way for new beginnings. As I finally went inside, chilled but somehow lighter, I knew that whatever came next, Richard's sentencing, our continued adjustment to life in Maine, the slow process of healing our fractured family, we would face it with Eleanor's legacy of wisdom, foresight, and resilient love guiding our way. True wealth, I was learning, had nothing to do with houses or bank accounts. It lived in the connections we chose to nurture, the boundaries we had the courage to set, and the grace we offered others when they lost their way. Eleanor had understood that all along, and now finally so did I. Winter in Maine is not for the faint of heart. By January, Boothbay Harbor had transformed into a postcard of New England winter boats, shrouded in tarps along the quiet harbor snow, blanketing the colonial homes lining the streets and the ocean, a deep slate gray that mirrored the sky. The tourists were long gone, leaving behind a close-knit community that hunkered down through the cold months together. Inside our home, the stone fireplace became the heart of our daily lives. Each evening, we gathered around its warmth, me in Eleanor's old reading chair, Patricia grading nursing certification papers at the kitchen table, Lily sprawled on the floor with textbooks surrounding her. The sentencing is tomorrow, Patricia said one night, setting aside her papers. She hadn't mentioned Richard in weeks, and his name falling into our peaceful evening felt like a stone disturbing still water. Yes, I acknowledged. Martin called this morning. Will you watch it? There's a live stream from the courthouse. I shook my head. I don't think so. Why not? Lily asked, looking up from her psychology textbook. Because I've already said my goodbyes, I replied. What to Richard as a person, but to the idea that he was someone different than who he proved to be. Patricia studied me with an expression so like her mother's, perceptive, discerning. Do you think he's changing? Really changing? I don't know, I said honestly. People are capable of change, but it takes more than words. It takes sustained action over time. Well, prison will give him plenty of time, Lily remarked, returning to her book. The next day came and went without us watching the sentencing. Martin called that evening with the news: 4 years, with possibility of parole, after 2.5+ mandatory restitution to all victims. He made a statement to the court, Martin told me, asked for forgiveness from the victims, said he would spend the rest of his life making amends. Good words, I said. Time will tell if there are more than that. After hanging up, I walked down to the dock despite the cold. The harbor was frozen near the edges, but the center remained open, dark water, rippling under the moonlight. I found myself talking to Eleanor as if she were standing beside me. 4 years, I said to the night air. Is that justice? Is it enough? Too much? I wish you were here to tell me. No answer came, of course, but I could almost hear Eleanor's practical voice in my head. Justice isn't one moment in a courtroom. It's what happens after, day by day. When I returned to the house, Patricia was waiting with a mug of hot cider. Are you okay? She asked. I think so, I said, accepting the warm drink gratefully. Just trying to make peace with everything. She nodded, understanding. Mom would be proud of how you've handled this. I hope so. I'm just following the path she laid out. No, Patricia shook her head. You're doing more than that. The way you've set boundaries with Richard, but left the door open for redemption. How you helped Amanda find her way forward. Even how you're helping Charlie Freeman. Those are your choices, Dad, your wisdom. I hadn't thought of it that way, had been giving Eleanor credit for every good decision. But Patricia was right. While Eleanor had provided the sanctuary, the choices about how to navigate our new reality had been mine. As winter gradually loosened its grip on coastal Maine, our lives settled into rhythms that felt increasingly like home. Patricia was thriving in her supervisory role at the medical center, respected for her experience and steady nature. Lily had transferred to the University of Maine and joined the rowing team, her natural athleticism finding expression on the water. And I found myself becoming part of the community in ways I hadn't anticipated. My volunteer work at the Historical Society expanded when they discovered my talent for organization and detail skills honed through decades of postal service management. Soon I was helping catalog maritime artifacts, conducting research for exhibitions, and even giving occasional tours to the first spring tourists. You've got the touch with visitors, Margaret told me, after watching me lead a group through the Society's small museum. They love your stories. I'm just repeating what I've learned from the archives. I demurred. She laughed. No, Walter, you're bringing the archives to life. There's a difference. By April, Green was returning to the landscape, and with it came unexpected news from Boston. Martin called one morning as I was preparing to leave for the Historical Society. Walter, I have some unusual information to share, he began. It's about the Boston house. What about it? Has something happened? You could say that. Someone wants to buy it. They've made a very generous offer, well above market value. I frowned, immediately suspicious. Who? That's the unusual part. It's Robert Westfield. The name meant nothing to me. Should I know who that is? Yes. He's one of the investors Richard defrauded. One of the largest victims, actually. Lost nearly $800,000. And he wants to buy our house. Why? He says he's been looking in that neighborhood for years. But between us, I think there might be more to it. My suspicion deepened. Such as, it could be an attempt to secure assets before the civil lawsuits against Richard are fully resolved. By buying your property at a premium, he might be trying to recoup some of his losses indirectly. Is that even legal? Technically, yes. The house is your asset, not Richard's. You are free to sell it to whomever you choose. I considered this. Set up a meeting. I want to talk to this Mr. Westfield face to face. 2 weeks later, I was back in Boston for the first time since our departure. The city felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, like a place remembered from a dream. Our old neighborhood looked exactly as we'd left it, cherry trees now blooming along the street where Eleanor and I had spent 4 decades of our lives. Martin met me at the house, which had been maintained by a service during our absence. Together, we waited for Robert Westfield in the kitchen, where months earlier, Richard and Amanda had tried to auction away my independence. Westfield arrived precisely on time, a tall, imposing man in his 60s with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to getting his way. He assessed the house with an appraiser's eye as I showed him through the rooms. Fine craftsmanship, he noted, running his hand along the banister Eleanor had refinished herself years ago. They don't build them like this anymore. After the tour, we settled in the living room, the spring sunlight streaming through windows that needed washing after the long winter. Mr. Thompson, Westfield began, I appreciate you meeting with me. I understand this house has tremendous sentimental value to you. It does, I agreed, which makes me curious about why you're offering 20% above market value. Westfield smiled slightly. Your attorney mentioned you were direct. I appreciate that. He leaned forward. The truth is, I've been watching this neighborhood for investment opportunities for years. When I learned this property might eventually come on the market, I decided to make a preemptive offer. And how exactly did you learn that? He hesitated. Let's just say information travels in financial circles. Let's not just say anything, Mr. Westfield. I prefer transparency. His smile faded. Very well. I was one of the larger investors in your son's fraudulent scheme. When the fraud was exposed and the legal proceedings began, I took a personal interest in recovering as much of my investment as possible. And you think buying my house accomplishes that how? Directly it doesn't, but it gives me a certain satisfaction. Understanding dawned. This is about vengeance, not investment. Westfield's expression hardened. Your son stole my retirement, Mr. Thompson. Money I worked 40 years to earn. Do you have any idea what that feels like? More than you might think, I replied evenly. Richard stole from me too, and from his sister, and from his niece's college fund. That seemed to surprise him. I wasn't aware. Few people are. We chose to handle it privately. We sat in silence for a moment, two older men contemplating the damage done by someone we had both trusted. May I ask why you're still protecting this house? Westfield finally asked. You've moved to Maine from what I understand. Do you plan to return? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself for months. The house sat empty, a repository of memories, but no longer a home. I'm not entirely sure, I admitted. Part of me has been holding on to it as a connection to the past. To Eleanor. Your late wife. I nodded. But Eleanor was never overly sentimental about physical things. She believed home was wherever we were together. I gestured around the living room. This place served its purpose for us. Perhaps it's time for it to serve someone else. Then you'll consider my offer. I'll consider selling, I clarified, but not to you, Mr. Westfield. His expression darkened. May I ask why not? Because your motivation is wrong. You want to buy this house as an act of revenge against my son. That may feel satisfying in the moment, but it won't heal what's broken. That's a rather presumptuous assessment. Perhaps, but am I wrong? Westfield didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. No, you're not wrong. After he left, Martin looked at me with raised eyebrows. That was unexpected. Are you really considering selling? I think it's time, I said, looking around at the home that now felt like a museum of my previous life, but not as an act of revenge or desperation, as a choice to move forward. That evening, I called a family meeting via video chat with Patricia and Lily back in Maine. I outlined my thinking about selling the Boston house and asked for their honest opinions. I think it's a good idea, Patricia said after a thoughtful pause. We've built a new life in Maine. Holding on to the Boston house feels like keeping one foot in the past. What about your childhood memories? I asked. Your connection to the place where you grew up? She smiled gently. Dad, my memories aren't in the walls or floors. They're in the stories we tell, the photos we keep, the lessons Mom and you taught us. Those come with us wherever we go. Lily nodded in agreement. Plus, wouldn't it make more sense financially? You're paying to maintain two properties, one of which nobody's living in. There's that practical Thompson mind, I said with a smile. Your grandmother would approve. The decision made, I contacted a real estate agent the next day, not the one Richard had brought to pressure me, but a woman Charlie Freeman recommended. I gave her clear instructions, no rush fare, market value, and a preference for a family who would love the house as we had. With that task set in motion, I prepared to return to Maine. But before leaving Boston, I had one more stop to make. The correctional facility where Richard was serving his sentence sat on the outskirts of the city, a cluster of concrete buildings surrounded by high fences. I had not planned to visit when I came to Boston, had not even told Martin I was considering it. But as my departure approached, I found myself making the call to arrange a visit. The process was tedious and dehumanizing forms to complete ID checks, security screenings, and stern instructions from guards. Finally, I was led to a large room with tables where other visitors sat across from inmates in identical khaki uniforms. Richard looked smaller somehow. His confident posture diminished but not entirely gone. His face registered shock when he saw me. "Dad," he said as I sat across from him, "I didn't expect. They just told me I had a visitor." "I was in Boston on business," I explained. "Quelling the house." Pain flickered across his features. "The house, really?" "It's time," I said simply. He nodded, absorbing this. "I understand, it makes sense." We sat in awkward silence for a moment, surrounded by the murmur of other conversations, some tearful, others forced cheerful. "How's Maine?" Richard finally asked. "Good, peaceful. Your sister has been promoted at the medical center. Lily is doing well at university. And you?" "I've found my place. Working with the Historical Society, making friends." Richard smiled faintly. "Mom would be happy about that. She always said you needed more hobbies." The mention of Eleanor hung between us, both connecting and separating us, a shared loss viewed through very different lenses. "How are you doing in here?" I asked. He shrugged slightly. "It's prison, not supposed to be comfortable." He glanced around. "But I'm learning a lot, teaching a financial literacy class for inmates about to be released, trying to help them avoid predatory lending, understand credit, that sort of thing." "That sounds worthwhile." "It is." For the first time, genuine animation entered his voice. "Most of these guys have never had anyone explain how money really works. They're easy targets for payday loans, bad mortgages, all the legal scams that keep people trapped." "Legal scams," I repeated. "Ironic that you're the one teaching them." "I know," he acknowledged. "Trust me, the irony isn't lost on anyone here. But maybe that's why they listen. I've been on both sides of financial deception." We talked for nearly an hour. Richard told me about his daily routine, the correspondence course in counseling he'd enrolled in, his tentative plans for after release. I shared more details about our life in Maine, about Patricia's growing confidence in her new role, about Lily's adventures on the rowing team. As the guard announced that visiting hours were ending, Richard looked at me intently. "Why did you come, Dad?" Really, I considered the question carefully. To close one chapter before beginning another, I suppose. To see for myself if the changes you spoke about were real or just words. "And your verdict?" "The jury's still out," I said honestly, "but there's evidence worth considering." Richard nodded, accepting this measured response. "Thank you for coming. It means more than you know." As I rose to leave, he asked, "Will you tell Patricia I said hello, and that I'm sorry I write letters, but she sends them back unopened?" "I'll tell her," I promised. "But Patricia needs to process this in her own way, at her own pace." "I understand," he said, and I believed he actually did. "Just let her know I'll keep writing, even if she never reads them." On the flight back to Maine, I watched Boston recede beneath me, the city where Eleanor and I had built our life together, raised our children, planned for a retirement we wouldn't get to share. I felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for what was lost, gratitude for what remained, and a curious lightness that came with letting go. Margaret picked me up from the small regional airport, her ancient Subaru chugging reliably along the coastal road back to Boothbay Harbor. "So," she said, glancing sideways at me, "how was the prodigal son?" I'd emailed her about my planned visit to Richard before leaving. "Changed, or changing. It's hard to know for certain." "People can surprise you," she noted, "sometimes even themselves." "Eleanor always believed in Richard's better nature," I said, "even when the evidence suggested otherwise." Margaret smiled. "That was Eleanor, clear-sighted about problems, but forever hopeful about people." When we arrived home, Patricia was waiting on the porch, a mug of tea in her hands. Margaret waved goodbye as I climbed the steps to join my daughter. "How was Boston?" Patricia asked. "Familiar but different, like visiting a place you used to live in a previous life." She nodded, understanding. "And the house, listed as of yesterday, The agent thinks it will sell quickly. How do you feel about that? I considered the question. Ready. It's the right time. Patricia hesitated. Did you see Richard while you were there? So Margaret had shared that information too. I wasn't surprised. In small communities, news traveled faster than light. Yes, I said simply. He asked me to tell you hello and that he's sorry. Patricia's expression tightened. Is that supposed to mean something after everything he did? It means he's thinking about you, I said gently. What that's worth is for you to decide. Did seeing him change anything for you? She asked. It clarified things, I replied. Reminded me that people are more than their worst mistakes. Not excused by any means, but not entirely defined by them either. Later that evening, Patricia found me on the porch wrapped in a blanket against the spring chill that still settled over Maine nights. I have something to tell you, she said, sitting beside me. I've been offered a permanent position at the medical center, director of nursing. Patricia, that's wonderful, I exclaimed. You've earned it. She smiled, but there was hesitation in her eyes. It means committing to staying here long term. I wanted to make sure you're okay with that before I accept. Why wouldn't I be? Because this move to Maine was originally your fresh start, Dad. Your escape from what Richard did. I don't want to impose on that by assuming Lily and I should stay permanently. I reached over and took her hand. This place was never meant to be just my sanctuary. Eleanor created it for all of us, for whoever needed it. Really? I nodded. In her letter, she wrote about a place where I could live in peace if our children forget what we taught them about respect and dignity. She said our children, plural, even though she was specifically concerned about Richard's behavior. She was creating a safety net for the whole family, whoever might need it. Patricia's eyes grew moist. Mom always did think of everything. So take the job, I encouraged her. Make this your permanent home. It's what Eleanor would have wanted. The next morning brought unexpected news. Martin called early, his voice tense. Walter, there's been a development with the Boston house, a rather unusual one. What's happened? Has Westfield made another offer? No, it's not Westfield. It's Amanda. Amanda, I repeated, confused. Richard's Amanda. Ex-wife now, technically. The divorce was finalized last month. Martin paused. She wants to buy the house. I sat down stunned. Our house? Why would Amanda want our house? She's asked to speak with you directly. Says it's complicated to explain through intermediaries. Still confused, I agreed to a video call later that morning. At the appointed time, Amanda's face appeared on my laptop screen. She looked different from when I'd last seen her. Her hair was shorter, her makeup minimal, her designer clothes replaced by a simple blouse. Walter, she greeted me. Thank you for speaking with me. Martin tells me you're interested in buying our house, I said, getting straight to the point. I have to admit I'm having trouble understanding why. She nodded. I know it must seem strange after everything that's happened. She took a deep breath. The truth is, I've been doing a lot of soul searching since Richard's arrest. About the kind of life I want, the person I want to be. And that involves our house, how I've started a nonprofit, she explained, working with women who've been financially abused by their partners. Women who, like me, were kept in the dark about finances, manipulated, used as unwitting accomplices. This was unexpected. That sounds worthwhile. But again, what does this have to do with our house? I need a location, Amanda said. Somewhere to host support groups, financial literacy workshops, legal clinics, somewhere that feels safe and welcoming, not institutional. She paused. When I heard you were selling, it seemed, I don't know, almost meant to be. The house has good bones, a central location, enough space for what I need. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Amanda, forgive my skepticism, but this is quite a transformation from the woman who wanted to lock me in her basement less than a year ago. To my surprise, she laughed, a genuine sound without the brittle edge I remembered. That's fair. I deserve that. Her expression sobered. Walter, when everything fell apart with Richard, I lost my home, my social circle, my identity as the perfect finance wife. It forced me to look at who I really was, and I didn't like what I saw. So this is about redemption. Partly, she admitted, but it's also about purpose. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something that matters, something that might actually help people. I considered her words, remembering Eleanor's belief in second chances. How would you finance this? Our house isn't cheap, and you said you lost everything in the divorce. Not everything, Amanda corrected. My family had money, not as much as I pretended, but enough. I've sold some inherited property that I'd held on to. Plus, I've secured some grant funding for the nonprofit. And converting a residential property to a business use the zoning. She smiled slightly. I've done my homework. The area is zoned for mixed use, and there's precedent for similar conversions on that block. I had to admit I was impressed by her thoroughness. You've thought this through. I have, she agreed, but I understand if you're not comfortable with the idea after what Richard and I tried to do to you. Well, I wouldn't blame you for showing me the door. I thought about Eleanor, about what she might advise in this situation, about how she had created our main sanctuary not out of fear or bitterness, but from a place of foresight and love. I'm not saying yes, I told Amanda carefully, but I'm not saying no either. I'd like to learn more about this nonprofit of yours. See some documentation, business plans, board members. If this is genuine, it might be a fitting new chapter for the house. The relief on her face was palpable. Of course, I'll send everything to Martin today. After ending the call, I sat for a long time thinking about the strange turns life takes, how people and places can transform in unexpected ways. The house where Richard had tried to rob me of my independence might become a place where women reclaimed theirs from situations not unlike my own. When I shared Amanda's proposition with Patricia and Lily over dinner, their reactions were predictably different. Absolutely not, Patricia said immediately. How can you even consider it? After what she did, people change, Lily countered. Look at Uncle Richard. He seems to be making real efforts in prison. That's different, Patricia insisted. He's had consequences. Amanda just walked away. Did she? I asked gently. She lost her home, her marriage, her social standing. Those are consequences, too. Patricia shook her head stubbornly. I don't trust her dad. This feels like another manipulation. Maybe, I acknowledged. That's why I'm doing due diligence. But what if it's not? What if this is genuine growth? Over the next 2 weeks, Martin vetted Amanda's nonprofit thoroughly. The documentation was impeccable. 501c3 status, confirmed grant funding, secured respected professionals on the board of directors, clear financial plans that showed sustainable operations. If this is a scam, Martin told me, it's the most elaborate one I've ever seen. She's got legitimate backing from several women's advocacy organizations. I mulled over the decision, walking the main shoreline each morning as spring fully took hold, transforming the landscape with vibrant greens and the first colorful blooms. One morning I found Margaret working in her garden and stopped to chat over her picket fence. Still wrestling with the Amanda situation? She asked perceptively. I nodded. Everything checks out on paper, but Patricia remains deeply skeptical. Margaret deadheaded a spent daffodil with practiced efficiency. Patricia has good instincts, but she also has deeper wounds from Richard's betrayal than you do. How do you figure that? Because Richard betrayed you financially and tried to take your independence. But he betrayed Patricia as a brother, the person who was supposed to have her back since childhood. And he took her daughter's future. Margaret looked up at me. Different kind of wound altogether. Her insight struck me as profoundly true. So what would you do about Amanda and the house? Margaret straightened up, brushing soil from her gardening gloves. I'd ask myself what purpose the house could best serve now, and whose healing matters most in this situation. I thought about this as I continued my walk. Whose healing mattered most, Patricia's, was certainly paramount to me as her father. But then I considered the women Amanda's nonprofit would serve women who had been manipulated and controlled, much as Richard had tried to control me. That evening, I called Patricia. I'd like to come visit for the weekend, I told her. There's something I want to discuss in person. When I arrived at her small, rented cottage near the medical center, Patricia had prepared dinner, Eleanor's recipe for fish chowder, that had sustained us through countless New England winters. This conversation requires comfort food, she explained as we sat down to eat. After dinner, we settled in her small living room with cups of tea. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, tapping against the windows. You've decided to sell the house to Amanda, Patricia said directly. I'm considering it, I corrected, but I won't do it if you're strongly opposed. She looked surprised. Why would my opinion matter that much? It's your house. Because Eleanor created this haven in Maine for all of us. This isn't just about my decisions anymore. We're rebuilding our family, and that means making important choices together. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I still don't trust Amanda. I understand that, and your instincts may be right. I paused. But I've been thinking about something Margaret said about different kinds of wounds and whose healing matters most. What does that mean? I explained Margaret's perspective about how Richard's betrayal had wounded Patricia differently than it had wounded me. She's right, Patricia admitted. Every time I think about what he did, I remember all the times growing up when he promised to look out for me, to always be there. Then he stole Lily's future without a second thought. Her voice caught. How do you reconcile that? I don't think you can completely, I said gently. But here's what I've been considering. What if selling the house to Amanda could help heal a different set of wounds? Not yours or mine, but those of women who've been controlled and manipulated the way Richard tried to control me. Patricia looked thoughtful. You really believe her nonprofit is legitimate? Everything we've investigated suggests it is. And even if Amanda's motivation began as seeking redemption, the work itself matters. Those women need help. So this isn't about forgiving Amanda. Not necessarily, I clarified. It's about finding the best purpose for a house that served its purpose for our family. About using what we have to help others heal, even as we continue healing ourselves. The rain intensified outside, drumming steadily against the roof. Patricia stared into her tea, thinking. Mom would probably approve, she finally said. She always did believe in second chances. Yes, she did, I smiled faintly. So what do you think? Could you make peace with this decision? Patricia sighed. I can't promise I'll ever feel warmly towards Amanda, but the work she's proposing, I can't argue with that. She looked up at me. If you think this is the right path, Dad, I trust your judgment. The decision made events moved quickly. Amanda's offer was fair market value with a clean timeline for closing. Martin handled the details with his usual efficiency, and by early June the sale was complete. The house where Eleanor and I had raised our family would begin a new chapter as a refuge for women reclaiming their independence. On the day of closing, Amanda called me directly. I want to thank you, she said, not just for accepting my offer, but for believing this could be possible. The house has always been a place of new beginnings, I told her. First for Eleanor and me as newlyweds, then for our children as they grew now, for the women you'll help. I was thinking, Amanda said hesitantly, with your permission, I'd like to name the center after Eleanor, the Eleanor Thompson Women's Center for Financial Independence. Would that be all right? The request caught me off guard, emotion welling unexpectedly. I think Eleanor would be honored, I managed to say. She always believed in helping others find their strength. That's what Patricia told me when she called yesterday. Now I was truly surprised. Patricia called you. Yes, she offered to volunteer occasionally, said her experience as a nurse might be helpful for women under stress. Amanda paused. I think she's still deciding if she trusts me, but she believes in the work. After hanging up, I stood on the porch watching the harbor, marveling at how life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. Patricia extending an olive branch to Amanda. The Boston house transformed from a site of betrayal to one of empowerment. Our family fractured, but slowly finding new ways to connect. Summer arrived in full glory along the Maine coast. Tourists returned to Boothbay Harbor, filling the shops and restaurants with cheerful bustle. Lily came home from university, tanned and fit from rowing, bringing with her a newfound confidence and independence. On a perfect July afternoon, we hosted a small gathering at our home. Patricia and Lily Margaret and her partner, several friends from the Historical Society and Medical Center. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, casting golden light across the water, I raised a glass in toast. To new beginnings, I said, and to Eleanor, who made them possible. To Eleanor, they echoed, glasses raised. Later, as the gathering wound down and guests departed, I found myself alone on the dock with Margaret. We sat in comfortable silence, watching boats return to the harbor after a day at sea. You know, she said eventually, Eleanor would be proud of how you've all found your way through this. I hope so, I replied. I've tried to follow the path she laid out. Not just follow it, Margaret corrected. Extend it. Eleanor gave you the starting point, but you've built something new from there. She gestured toward the house where Patricia and Lily were clearing dishes, laughing together. That's yours, Walter. The healing, the boundaries, the second chances offered with clear eyes rather than blind trust. Eleanor provided the sanctuary, but you've created the recovery. Her words settled over me with the weight of truth. For nearly a year, I'd attributed every good decision to Eleanor's foresight. But Margaret was right. While Eleanor had provided the foundation, the choices about how to rebuild our lives had been ours. Mine, Patricia's, even Lily's. The next morning brought a letter from an unfamiliar address. Inside was a simple card with Richard's precise handwriting. "Dad," it began, "I received word about the sale of the house and its new purpose. I can't think of a more fitting tribute to Mom than using our family home to help others find freedom from financial abuse. I know this decision couldn't have been easy, given everything I put you through. It speaks to your character and to the values you and Mom tried to instill in Patricia and me. I'm working hard to reconnect with those values even from in here. Thank you for showing me it's possible to choose grace without compromising boundaries. Richard." I read the letter twice, noting what wasn't there. No excuses, no manipulation, no request, just acknowledgement and gratitude. A small step perhaps, but a meaningful one. That evening, I showed the letter to Patricia as we sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "What do you think?" I asked after she'd read it. She handed it back thoughtfully. "It sounds genuine, different from his usual tone." I thought so too. She gazed out at the darkening water. "Do you think people really change, Dad?" "Fundamentally change? I believe they can," I said carefully. "Not easily and not without real work. But yes, I think change is possible. Because of what you're seeing in Richard." "Partly," I acknowledged, "but also because of what I've seen in myself, in you, even in Amanda." Patricia considered this. "I'm still angry at him. I'm not sure when or if that will ever fully go away." "That's okay," I assured her. "Healing isn't linear, and it doesn't look the same for everyone." She nodded, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. I wrote back to one of his letters. "I haven't decided if I'll send it yet." "What does it say?" I asked gently. "That I'm listening. Not forgiving yet, but listening." She turned the envelope in her hands. "Is that enough?" "For now, yes," I said. "It's a beginning." As summer turned to autumn once more, our lives in Maine deepened, like tree roots establishing themselves in new soil. Patricia purchased a small house near the harbor, finally using the trust Eleanor had established for her. Lily thrived in her second year at university, declaring a major in psychology with plans to work with at-risk youth. And I found a new rhythm to my days, mornings at the Historical Society, afternoons in the garden, or walking the shoreline evenings often spent with friends or family. The grief of losing Eleanor remained a familiar ache that I no longer tried to escape, but it was accompanied by gratitude for the life we'd shared and the legacy she'd left behind. In October, almost exactly a year after our arrival in Maine, I received an unexpected call from Martin. "Walter, I thought you should know. The Eleanor Thompson Women's Center officially opened yesterday. There was a small ceremony. Amanda asked me to send you photos." Later that day, the images arrived in my email, the familiar facade of our Boston home, now with a discreet sign beside the front door. Inside, the living room where we had celebrated countless family occasions had been transformed into a warm, welcoming reception area. The kitchen, where Amanda had once spread architectural drawings of my basement apartment, now hosted a financial literacy workshop for a dozen women. The final photo showed Amanda cutting a ribbon across the front door, surrounded by her board of directors and several clients. Behind them hung a framed photograph of Eleanor in her garden, her face alight with the quiet joy that had been her hallmark. I showed the photos to Patricia and Lily that evening when they came for dinner. We studied them in silence, each absorbing the transformation in our own way. "It's strange," Lily finally said. "Seeing the house like this, different but right somehow." Patricia nodded slowly. "I never would have imagined this outcome a year ago, any of it." "Life rarely follows the paths we imagine," I observed. "Sometimes it's better for it." As we sat down to dinner, I looked at the faces around the table, my daughter finding new strength and purpose, my granddaughter blossoming into a remarkable young woman, friends who had become like family. In the empty chair where Eleanor should have been, I placed a small framed photo of her, not to dwell in grief, but to include her presence in our continuing journey. To unexpected blessings, I proposed raising my glass. And to Eleanor, who taught us that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in the dignity with which we live. the boundaries we maintain and the grace we offer others and ourselves. To Eleanor, they echoed, and to us. In that moment, surrounded by love and the legacy of Eleanor's wisdom, I felt a sense of peace that had nothing to do with houses or bank accounts or carefully laid plans. It lived in the connections we had nurtured, the boundaries we had set with courage, and the new beginnings we had embraced. It was the true inheritance Eleanor had left us, not property or possessions, but the strength to build lives of meaning and purpose, even from the ashes of betrayal. As night fell over the main coastline, stars appearing one by one above the darkened water, I stepped onto the porch alone. The autumn air carried the scent of salt and pine cool against my face. "We did it, Eleanor," I whispered to the night. "We found our way through." No answer came, of course, but in the gentle rhythm of the waves against the shore, I felt her presence not as a ghost from the past, but as a foundation for the future. We continued to build day by day, choice by choice, love by love.